News Now is brought to you by the Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. From the Pacific News Center in Hagåtña, Guam, here's Clint Ridgell and Janella Carrera with Betsy Brown and Roselle Romanes. PNC Sports with Blake Watson. And weather with Joanna O. With your news now.
Welcome to PNC's News Now. We are broadcasting live in Saipan and in Guam. I'm Clint Ridgell.
And I'm Janella Carrera. Thanks for tuning in. Topping your news tonight, efforts have been made to mitigate the smell coming from the Luzon landfill, but is it enough? Well, last September, we reported that Inarajan Middle School students and staff complained about the smell. The issue was brought up in court last week, but stakeholders say until secondary treatment is achieved, the pungent smell of human waste will continue to linger. 798 tons. That's how much biosolids, or human waste, is dumped in the Luzon landfill every month. But that wasn't always the case. Back in 2011, when the landfill first opened, the Guam Waterworks Authority was only sending down about 145 tons every month. GWA spokeswoman Heidi Ballendorf explains why the sudden increase.
Because of the way we're treating the biosolids, the chemicals that we're using are heavier. It's making the solids heavier.
But even with the chemical treatment, the sludge still emits a foul odor. Chase Anderson, the operations manager for solid waste federal receivers Gershman, Brickner, and Bratton, says there was at one point when the smell was much worse. The only solution that could eliminate the foul smell completely would be a secondary treatment facility. Right now, only the Northern Wastewater Treatment Plant is capable of secondary treatment. The other plants on Guam have no secondary treatment, which would essentially dry the biosolids.
And what that will do is reduce the volume of material that goes to the Luzon landfill, they say, by approximately 30%. That would be great. That'll save on hauling, that'll save on tipping fee, and obviously there'll be less material in the landfill. But it will also decrease the amount of smell that we now have with that sludge.
GWA does in fact dry the solids, but only at a meager 28%.
So they do dry it, but it's really only at 28% or so dry, which really means
it's a big bowl of Jell-O.
It's still wet.
Right now. And with the secondary process, it'll just become more like earth.
Okay. In the meantime, Anderson says GSWA is working with GWA to find ways to reduce the pungent smell.
One is, if we can get that material into the Luzon landfill when we have the most trash, not at the end of the day, but in the mid-morning, then we can mix that with the trash, and that helps suffocate the smell, so to speak.
Anderson says they also have a contractor they're working with to build a perimeter that would also help mitigate the smell. But until GWA can get funding for secondary treatment plants, that's really all that can be done. So how much money will they need?
Well, we're going to spend $65 million in Agate and Santa Rita for the plant down there. That will be a secondary treatment plant. For this one, I would think it'd be somewhere around $100 million, because that's how much it's going to cost Northern. It's about $110 million.
And Ballendorf says GWA is hoping that funding could be provided in some way through the military buildup.
NAVFAC Mariana's commanding officer, Captain Glenn Shepard, says the Navy may have to raise its water rates again in 2016. Captain Shepard sat down with PNC this morning to explain why the Navy has increased its water rates. He also discussed the possibility of transferring Fenna Lake to Gov Guam.
We are about ready to set our rates for fiscal year 2016. The trend is looking like it may go up some more.
While the rates haven't been set yet, NAVFAC Mariana's commanding officer, Captain Glenn Shepard, says that Navy water rates will likely go up even more in fiscal year 2016. The Navy's water rates just recently went up. Captain Shepard explains that the rate increases were necessary in order for the Navy to recoup losses it incurred after making numerous upgrades to their water system over recent years.
Regulations from DOD have restricted Navy from recovering revenue losses in the past 7 years or so. And it's only until FY14 where after that we've been able to have an increase in our rate to help recover some of the revenue accumulated losses, as we would call it, in the past.
These raises in rates have sparked discussion over the ownership of Fenna Lake and the Navy's water system as a whole. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities wants the Navy to transfer their water system to GovGuam to make one unified, fully integrated water system on island.
We're initiating some dialogue with Guam Water Works Authority and CCU to perhaps look at a framework where there might be opportunities for system integration and perhaps even long-term conveyance.
In other words, talks are beginning about the possibility of transferring Fenna Lake and the Navy's water system to GWA.
If you look at the history and what happened with Guam Power and how the Navy conveyed the power system, I believe back in 1992 era, so the framework exists to go down that path.
Captain Shepard thinks the best way to make this happen is to involve the U.S. EPA, as they are the regulating authority over all U.S. water systems. However, there are things that could make this transfer complicated.
And FENA is important with respect to the naval magazine, which is surrounding the FENA reservoir, which becomes a very important asset and mission component to Department of Defense and the Navy.
These talks are just in the beginning stages, and many of these decisions are going to have to be made at the highest levels of government.
In light of these rate increases, the Guam Water Works Authority is buying less and less water from the Navy, and GWA spokeswoman Heidi Ballendorf says their ultimate goal is to buy zero water from the Navy. Because they are reducing their Navy water purchase, GWA has had to reroute water from the north down to Agate and Santa Rita. This rerouting of water is resulting in numerous breaks to the water lines in those villages. Ballendorf says that the lines in Agate and Santa Rita are in need of being replaced, which will cost millions of dollars. Ballendorf says they do have money set aside for this in their Capital Improvement Projects Fund, but she's not sure when the project will begin. She says they've been reducing their Navy purchase and rerouting water from the north to the south for the past 5 to 7 years now.
Now we're really trying to get it down to zero. I think that would be, if I were to speak for the commission, I think that they would say we would like to not purchase any Navy water at all.
They are a client, so I think in the long run it may have an effect on our rates in the future if we are not selling as many units, as many gallons. It could have an effect on future rates.
NAVFAC Mariana's commanding officer, Captain Glenn Shepard, says that through buying less water, GWA is spending about the same amount on Navy water as it spent last fiscal year.
Residents had a lot of questions when the news broke that two men who appeared to be intoxicated found their way into a school bus headed for Tizon High on Friday. PNC's Rizal Romanes spoke with Department of Public Works Director Glenn Leon Guerrero this morning to find out what happened.
The million-dollar question. It's almost the end of the school year. How did a bus driver let two unfamiliar men board the bus? Department of Public Works Director Glenn Leon Guerrero says it turns out it was a substitute driver who wasn't familiar with the regular riders.
On that particular route, we had a change in driver. The original driver was sick, so we had an alternate driver come by.
According to the magistrate's report, the two men smelled of alcohol. But Leon Guerrero tells us that the bus driver did not notice anything unusual.
It was, I guess, 5 o'clock, 5:45 in the morning, and he didn't. That particular driver didn't notice anything peculiar. Those two people came in and they walked, and with Tizon High, there's not a uniform policy, so didn't notice anything unusual.
Leon Guerrero could not provide us with the bus driver's name or the bus number, but he did confirm that one of their drivers picked up the two men.
We did pick up the two people that were drunk and didn't recognize it immediately. We've had situations where we picked up students that were drunk in the past, and you know, we have a protocol. We stop and don't allow them into the bus, and they coordinate, the bus drivers coordinate with their supervisors, and they take it from there. So we do have a procedure in place. The fact is we missed it.
Leon Guerrero says the department is still looking into the matter, but as of today, no remedial action was taken against the driver in question. He points out that bus drivers will be given a refresher training to make sure this incident does not happen again.
If somebody gets into the school bus, I'm comfortable that should anything happen, our drivers are trained well enough so they can respond to whatever emergency or whatever situation occurs.
Leon Guerrero says DPW is only in charge of school busing and bus shelters. Once students get off the bus and get on the Department of Education's property, DOE is held responsible for the students. He tells us that the two departments have great communication with one another. Rosal Romanes, PNC News.
An oil spill from a Guam Power Authority fuel pipeline this afternoon was immediately contained, according to GPA spokesman Art Perez. Maintenance crews were extracting oil from the pipeline when about 50 gallons of residual fuel oil sprayed out of the pipe, Perez said. Since crews were already on site, they were able to identify the location of the leak right away and contain the spill. The leak is currently classified as a surface area spill, meaning there was little to no seepage into the topsoil. The Guam Environmental Protection Agency and emergency responders were called to the site on Cañada Road in Totu. The extraction was being done as part of the closure of the Tengisan power plant.
All right, let's check in now with Blake Watson to find out what's going on in sports.
Question. Who would win in a fight out of an Islander and a shark? You got to weigh out your options, right? The Islanders, they're humans. They have opposable thumbs, so they can do things like throw spears and build stuff. But then you have the sharks. They got teeth. They can bite. Spears and fins. Who wins out of JFK, Simon Sanchez? That's where I was going with all of that. Sports, not too far away. Stick around. You won't be sorry. I'll be there.
Only